you ever wondered, you've heard, I'm sure many of you have heard the phrase, dog obedience school or dog obedience training or whatever that might be. Have you ever wondered if there is such a thing as our animals teaching us something instead of us teaching them something? It's just a random thought. Actually, it's been fairly central to my thinking over the last week. But before I do that, let me introduce myself and what it is you're listening to. Obviously, you probably know because you chose it in your podcasting variety or whatever that might be. So, yes, you are listening to the Psych Monologues. It is good to have you. I'm Dr. Ray Mitsch, your host. Thanks so much for setting aside some time to listen to some of my meanderings through life and how it presents itself to us and to me, just my reflections on it. So, what is the Psych Monologues? Actually, the Psych Monologues is slowly but surely becoming a ministry within a larger ministry called Stained Glass International, which I will briefly introduce, not really introduce, but continue to get people accustomed to what it is that I'm talking about when I talk about SGI or SG International or Stained Glass International. So the Psych Monologues, it's a podcast. We explore the intersection of faith, psychology, and spiritual formation. And I am your host, Dr. Ray Mitsch, a psych prof at Colorado Christian University, and your humble companion on this thing that we call the spiritual journey or life or whatever it is, this idiotic day that I had to get through, whatever you call it. So pull up a chair, get comfortable, relax. Let's talk about some of the things that matter. Ironically, it's stuff that matters to me. I'm just assuming that you might be interested in listening to some of my reflections on the things that happen to me, and hopefully some of the things that come out of it will be useful to you as you head into a new week and have a variety of your own individual unique experiences. So hopefully it'll push in on where you live and what you think and how you feel about living life with others, and others is a bigger arena, which I hope to expand tonight, and your living life in relationship with Jesus. So what I want to do, and this is kind of an odd way of looking. I don't know if it's an odd way of looking at it. It's just something that has been playing in my mind for all week, and I took some time over in the last episode to talk a little bit about the silent retreat and what that's like, and if you have any interest at all in it, then please head to the website and learn more about it. There's a drop down under CCU called Silent Retreats, and you can actually hear some testimonies of people that have gone through it and learn a little bit more about it. But the continuing story, and this is kind of the question, is, I'm sure you probably have heard the phrase dog obedience training or dog obedience school or, puppy school or whatever it is that we call it. And I had something, not strange, but I had something happen to me over this past week where suddenly I realized that it wasn't so much dog obedience as much as it was a person obedience or person training. And so what I want to do is just take some time tonight to introduce you to someone who joined our family. Actually, she happened to be waiting for me when I got home from the silent retreat. And many of you know, I talked a little bit about it, about the loss of our 16-year-old golden retriever named Coda and all the history that he took with him and what I kind of learned from it. And it's been 3 weeks now, and while I was at the retreat, I recognized the fact that I had some work to do, not really work, but just processing to do to begin to have my heart heal from the loss of Coda and all he meant and all that he was a part of and the memories that he didn't really take with him, but he certainly had attached to him. And so as the week progressed last week, we began, my wife in particular, began to get the itch, and we started talking a little bit about puppies and when we might want to think about getting another puppy, and started looking around at breeders and so forth. And she started up a conversation with somebody about that's a breeder who is a very good friend with the breeder of Coda, and so she talked some more, and this person literally kind of stopped her in mid-sentence and basically offered her one of her females that had finished up the breeding process. She had a number of litters, and so it was ready for her to move into another stage of life with a family and home and so forth. And as we talked, I was very honest about the fact that I'm not sure I have space in my heart just yet for another dog, and yet my wife was at a very different place, and that's just the nature of the journey through grief. Everybody goes at a different pace, and they handle it differently, and that's just okay. That's fine. And I said, if you're more inclined to go this direction, you feel free to do that, and I'll adjust as time moves along. And little did I know that this whole development was God lying in wait to show me something that I never, ever, ever expected, even in the midst of my grief. And so she went north and met with the breeder and met the dog, and it's a 6-year-old female golden by the name of Cherry. And, it's an interesting name, a fruit. And so be that as it may, she brought Cherry home last Friday, and she had the opportunity, Cherry did, the opportunity to acclimate to our home and to the predominant landscape of all women, okay? And she's a female, so I feel once again back in this place that I've often commented on, feeling like I'm outmanned, outgirled, and outgunned, however you want to put that. And so she was very comfortable, and the people that came and went from our home and met her and spent some time with her, except me. And I am once again the lone male in my family. And so here I come home, and I begin to try to introduce myself to Cherry, and she came very, very carefully and watchfully, because she knew that I was somebody that clearly was a safe person according to the humans around her. But she came and just gingerly walked to me, and I put my arms out, my hands out, and she came just within about 6 inches of the ends of my arm. And it was clear that she was really, really unsure about who I was and what I was about and anything else. And I literally had to move forward just to give her a scratch and talk to her a little bit and encourage her and the usual stuff that comes with meeting a new dog. And quite honestly, we've never done this before. She's 6 years old. She's already kind of put her patterns in place and learned them as far as social interactions and everything. Now, let me stop for a second at that point, okay? Because what I want you to do is, as I'm describing this, what I want you to do is think not only in the physical realm, in my interactions with Cherry, but in the spiritual realm. Because that's what I began to realize as I have been on this journey of the relationship with Jesus and who he is and how he teaches me. Because what he teaches and how he teaches me is different than it is for anyone else, for you or anyone else. And the remarkable thing about the nature of how he teaches us is really unique to whatever our needs are. I mean, it's the most, not professional, the most stylized and personal teaching you could possibly have, because it is designed specifically for you, and it was specifically for me. And so it dawned on me after that interaction, the first thoughts that came to my mind is, why are you afraid? I'm not a scary person, although to some people I might be, but I'm not a scary person. I'm safe. I'm offering you my hands, my access, everything, and you're treating it like I'm going to attack you. And so what could make your head hurt is switching back and forth from physical to spiritual. Because what I want you to think with me is how much we are like Cherry, how much I find myself that I am very much like her. And so she gingerly comes up to me, and I literally have to find ways to prove to her that I am safe. Okay, and a lot of times the path to a dog's heart is through their stomach. It's reinforcements, food. And so something that tells her that I'm okay. And again, you can get really indignant and say, wait a minute, you have a home, you have a roof over your head, you're safe, you don't have to fight for your food. I've done all that for you. Why are you being so cautious? What have I done to deserve that? And think about this. Think about this in the spiritual realm. There was no shame for me saying that. I'm not saying this. I'm not feeling these things in order to make her succumb to my will and my ability to help her. I'm not doing it for that. I suddenly now, all of a sudden, instead of the fear of Cherry, for me, I'm more consumed with the feeling that I've been judged, juried, and executed as a threat. And what slowly but surely began to develop in my mind is, wait a minute, this is not fair. This is not fair. Because somehow I'm living in the shadow of your fear of the objective truth, and that is I'm not a threat. So, moving right along, as the week progressed, we had our settled truce of sorts, and I had my individual times with her, and I'm out of the house quickly. I'm not going to say early because I'm not, but I'm out of the house and inaccessible for a long period of time, and then I reappear, and I can only imagine from a dog's world what that looks like. This human's gone, and then he just shows up again and expects to have some kind of relationship with me. And that's me adding thoughts to a dog, which is terribly dangerous. And a little annoying for me because there are lots of people who love to anthropomorphize dogs. And that's a fancy word for saying adding thoughts and things to them that are really uniquely human. And then acting as if that way. I mean, how many times have you seen a cat and you look at the cat and say, what are you looking at? or she's upset with me, or blah, blah, blah. We add all of these motives that are distinctly human motives that a cat's just going, leave me alone. I don't care. And a dog, we do the same thing, as we make it more human-like in order to relate to it. And that's an aside. That's off the beaten track here. So, but what I want to, there's some observations I can make about this, okay? Because she comes in and all she's known is really a world populated by other dogs, not overwhelmingly so all human, but other dogs, and they provide each other a certain level of protection because they're pack animals, and so together we're safer. And I think in that environment, she had other dogs that she was safe with, and they hung out and played and had fun and everything else, and they interacted with the humans and had their unique relationship with the humans. But here she is placed in an unknown environment, in a house that she doesn't know, with humans that she only marginally knows, however you want to define that. What would you do? I mean, I had to ask the question, what would I do? And I'd probably start looking for some way to have some safety. So that concern rises because I'm unsure of my safety, whether there is evidence to the contrary or not. And what then gets kicked in is my sense of fear. And fear trumps thought. It trumps cognition. It trumps everything, really, in a lot of ways. And so she began, and I noticed this in her, is she began to look for safety somewhere. And that was not only a room in our house, but it was also certain people. And I'd enter a room, and her, Goldens are just wonderfully loyal and warm animals. They love humans. They love to relate to them. But I would enter the room, and her tail would go straight between her legs, and she'd have this intense kind of fear response. And so she went to who was safe, and that was the people that she bonded with first. And the other kind of question in there that I could see is, so how can I tell whether this person is safe or not? And for a dog, it's really pretty basic in a lot of ways. It's just who's not going to hurt me, who's going to feed me, who's going to, kind of give me belly rubs when I want one, and all of that kind of jazz. That's all well and good. But I think when I get into an unfamiliar, unknown environment, I begin reducing that environment down to safe zones that I can completely and irrevocably control, rather than risking anything. And so I saw her doing very similar things. Her kennel was the safe zone. There was another room in our house that was a safe zone. She had bonded with a couple members of our family there. And I just kind of enter and leave, and I'm just temporary. I'm just ephemeral here. And so the thing is that, again, let's shift into the spiritual environment. We have things happen to us. We have conclusions that we make, which is way beyond what Cherry may be doing here. But there are conclusions that we make, not only about how safe or unsafe the environment is, but our bodies are very dutiful. And when we begin to feel threatened, our bodies respond accordingly. And from a uniquely psych perspective, that would include our sympathetic nervous system, what's called that reflects a lot of things that are going on in our body. It ramps up. We become more vigilant. We watch more cues. We're paying attention to more things. Our heart increases. Our blood pressure ticks up a little bit. And we begin paying attention to more and more cues to be what? Safe. And if I don't know the environment, I don't know where safety is, and I don't know any of that. And the thing is we oftentimes that determines kind of default behaviors for us when we start feeling the same things, even though the environment is safe. And when you think about it, that very thing happens to us in our spiritual environment too. It seems like it doesn't take a whole lot for us to go back to the safe zones, to look for safety from the zone, not necessarily to look for safety from the relationship, the connection. And we do that, and I think everybody does at some level or another. We're not going to risk anything. We're not going to risk looking happy. We're not going to risk any of those things because we don't know how safe it is. And that has become an overriding concern, more so than ever, I think, than what I've seen in social relationships even today. Partly because, this is just my commentary, but I think in a lot of ways, our relationships with people, our relationships with God has been contaminated by this ongoing checking with the world about whether it's safe or not. How do we know whether people say something back to us or not? And social media really has only kind of exacerbated that. It has just amplified that message even more. And so I'm constantly kind of poking the system, if you will, to get feedback so that I know that I'm okay, I'm safe. And so the week goes on, and we get to the weekend, and she and I began to interact a little bit more, and at times she loosens up, and then she goes right back to the way she was. We had one other interaction on Thursday, and I was up late because I'm a night owl, and I do a lot of thinking and writing and other things in the evening, grading, which is my primary role in life, apparently. And then it's time for her to bed down, and so I try to proceed to get her to go to her kennel, and now the fear response is in overdrive. And I can't get her in there. I'm not going to drag her in there because I'm already, my relationship with her is already tenuous. Now, again, shift gears just for a second, go into the spiritual realm. Have you been hurt? Have you been around people that are hurtful and say things, and we connect that with our environment, namely the church or God or other things like that? And the minute we start seeing any evidence that is showing up again and that's part of the world we're in, bam, we're gone. We're running. And the funny thing about it is that because we're human, our tendency is to explain our behaviors to ourselves, and it forms into a conclusion. So what is wrong with me that this person is acting this way or this environment is this way? Or what is profoundly wrong with them, and I need to do everything I can to control the outcome so that I don't get hurt. And so I begin to realize, as the week progressed, that I was getting a bird's eye view of perhaps the immense amount of love and grace Jesus has for me when I get afraid. When I get afraid. And even though he knows everything about my world, everything about the degree of danger in it and all of that, even in spite of that, he remains present. He still remains there. But I get this bird's eye view. There were a couple different things that caught myself, and I'm sitting on the floor with her, and I've got the dog treats, and it's like, I get frustrated because it's like I keep having to reassure her through the dog treats that I'm okay, and it's like, how long is this going to take? And holy cow! I mean, I'm not going to steal your freedom from you. I won't do that. But you can't know that without what? My presence and my consistency and and just my ability to reach into her world. And the thing that strikes me is the amount of grace and love that's required to allow me to find out how safe Jesus is, or how safe, in Cherry's case, how safe I am. I can't prove it to her. I can't argue her into it. I can get frustrated, but all that will do is just prove just how unsafe I am. And she needs to come on her own terms. She needs to have the freedom to choose. And in spite of all of our crowing and chest thumping about freedom, we're not really willing to let people have freedom. We're willing to have them have freedom with things that we want them to do or like them to do or would prefer, but we really don't want them to have freedom to say no. And so the challenge is developing trust rather than demanding trust. And what kind of people are we going to be? Now, the other thing that caught my attention, and what I found myself thinking more than once, is two different things. One, I wish you could just see that I am safe and I want to relate to you. I want to make space in my heart for you. How do you say that to a dog? I don't know. I don't think you could. But the other impulse that came to me was, I just wish I could do it for you. I just wish that I could just snap my fingers and you would realize that I'm safe and that I'm here and that I'm present and I don't run away and I don't create an environment that you're profoundly fearful all the time. I just wish I could do it for you. And the really, really, really amazing thing is there's a part of me, and this is just, my own strange thought process, I suppose, but I can't help but think that God saw how bereft we were because of our fallenness and because of our bad choices and our sinfulness and our inability to even get close to the target, let alone missing the target in our relationship with him. And I can't help but think, in so many different places, I just wish you would trust me. I just wish I could do it for you. And in some respects, I might be stretching the theology here, but I think exactly what God did in having Jesus taking on human form with human pains, human passions, human hunger and thirst and all the other things, and being tired and sleeping and not having enough sleep and whatever the list is, I can't help but think, well, that's a way for me to do it for you, is to become someone like you and then invite you into a relationship. So I recognize it's hard to relate to somebody that is a spiritual being. I got an idea. Why don't I become like you? And take that time and show my commitment and my love and my grace for you to walk life with you and develop the safety with you. Not for you or imposing it on you, but to just do it with you. Which ironically is what Jesus was called. We know it. We're coming up into the Christmas season. He was referred to as Emmanuel, God with us. And I can't help but think or wonder out loud now, because I'm doing this, but wonder if that isn't part of the whole deal. Is that God said, I see your world is unsafe. I see how unsafe it is. I see who it's populated by. And so I've got to find a way to show you that I'm trustworthy. Now, we have this fancy spiritual word that we call faith. But when it comes to trust, it seems like our trust is so fragile. I mean, isn't it? Mine is. It's just so fragile. It doesn't take a whole lot for me to say, so what good are you for anyway? If I've got to live day to day, and always feel this discomfort about who I am and whether I belong and how important I am or if I have value or whatever that is. It's like, what the heck? I mean, how trustworthy are you really? But see, our sense of trust is so fragile and so self-defined that it blinds us from seeing God's heart, his actual heart, which is displayed in Jesus. The other thing that catches my attention in all of this that has been repeating itself, and I have weeks, it seems like things run in themes, and maybe it's just because I'm paying attention to it or whatever it might be, but the other thing is just how divided we live. Just how divided we live in our thinking, in our loves and passions, in really all of it. And the reason I say that is that there's lots and lots and lots that we know and we can do chapter and verse with, but that's one domain that we live in, the accumulation of knowledge to know things. And in the world that I live in, it's the only thing, really, is developing knowledge. To what end or for what end? And usually, because of a lot of my psych students going into counseling, it's like, I'm learning this content, this knowledge, so that I can help others, just to put it simply. And a lot of times, that's the motivation for a lot of us in whatever the profession we move into. So knowledge is, as the phrase goes, the coin of the realm. It is the things that we trade in. And it is the world that we live in. But then what do we do with that knowledge when we're asked to have it intersect with our experience and our conclusions and the things that we live with in our own heads about ourselves and others and God and the world and how it works and all of that? And what we end up doing is what I was referring to in my last podcast. I know that, and I know that you're safe. I know that you're trustworthy. In a dog's brain, I don't think that they have thoughts like we do, but it shows up in their behavior, their bodies. That's how we figure that out. And so it's like, I know that you're safe, tail wagging. I know that you're safe, but everything inside of me says, don't approach, be really careful. And I suddenly knowledge has to intersect with experience and choices and even the relationship. And so that very same thing, there's so much of what I've been talking about for the last 20 minutes now that fits completely in the spiritual realm as much as it does in the physical realm. And Sherry's relationship with this new environment she's in of trustworthy, loving, and gracious people is predicated on what she once knew, not what she now is confronted with. And we do the same thing, but we say, I know it's safe, but. And then we have our previous experiences. We have all of these other kind of inner narratives and commentary and what ifs and everything else that says, yeah, but what if? And then the knowledge, quite honestly, fades into the background and is largely irrelevant. And so our relationship with God is very much the same way. We end up saying, I know God is good. I know God is faithful. I know all of these things. Check, check, check. But, and then what? But I fear, whatever, and then I choose on that. I don't choose on my knowledge. I choose on my experiences and feelings that I have about it. Now, in a lot of cases, people will say, well, that's exactly why you don't pay attention to your feelings. You do everything by logic, everything by knowledge, and everything's cool. But we as humans, even though we may idolize and define everything logically, the proof of the pudding is our decisions, particularly our relational decisions, not decisions on things that have no kind of import, but relational decisions, our emotional decisions. And that's why a lot of times people that are so devoted to knowing and cognition and all of that say, well, I make all my decisions by logic. Oh, really? Well, let me check your relationship with somebody you really care about. Is that all by logic? Or is that also informed, maybe even determined by the feelings you have, which you have spent most of your life avoiding or not identifying? I mean, after all, I can't really be controlled by something I don't label or identify. See, there's a lot of that goes into that very thing. And so I have been uncomfortably drugged, and I'll call it for what it is. I have been uncomfortably drugged in the midst of my grief to learn something about my relationship with God. And this is a window of what I was talking about last week, about what silence does for us. It opens a window for us to see a larger world and a larger opportunities to learn about where we are in our spiritual relationship with God. Because it's always there, because we bring it with us, whether we know it or not. We do. And so the challenge then becomes, is one of my students asked me, because I was talking about this in one of my classes, and they said, well, okay, if that's the case, and it was in his voice. It's like, okay, this is really uncomfortable. He didn't say that, but so how do we not think that way? And it's like, well, I can't really change anything I won't accept. And so if I don't accept that the premise of all of this is true, that I live holistically whether I want to or not. I might emphasize logic and cognition and thought and all rationality and all of that. But that doesn't preclude my living relationally or even based on passions. And that's why we make such mistakes oftentimes, why I make such mistakes, because I'm focusing on what I know, but I'm ignoring what's actually driving my behavior, and that's the passions and feelings and misgivings and fears and all the things that you can add to that. And so there's much to learn and even to reflect on, I think, in the nature of our relationship with God and Jesus. And whether you don't have one or not, the fundamental principles that I'm talking about are still true. Because one of the things that I say a lot is trust and control can't coexist, which means that if I believe I live in a world of threat and nothing is to be trusted, then the only thing left for me is to control things and people and relationships and outcomes and everything else. Now, that may work just fine for you. That's fine. It can. But then it misses life in it. And life then becomes fairly two-dimensional in terms of whether I win this battle or not, whether I get my desired outcome or not, and what conclusions do I make as a result of winning or losing this particular battle. And the reason I bring it up is that, it's not a matter of, let me put it this way. We think that we're trying to train a dog when in fact we're getting trained. And we're getting trained in bigger ways than we ever imagined. Because God is so busy in the world around you and in the world that you live in that there are opportunities that we're not even seeing to learn a little bit more about the relationship that He is calling you into. Not one built on the two-dimensional stuff that you've been told or the traditions you lived in or anything else. Not that. But a three-dimensional working out of the trust with what Jesus helps us to do, what Jesus shows us to do in relationships with people, what God has shown us to do in relationships. And that's the challenge, right? Is somewhere along the way, the truth of who Jesus is intersects with the story of who I am. And then I have choices to make. And actually, it's not a choice. It's choices that are made every day. When I engage Cherry tomorrow morning, I have a choice to make. It's like, well, heck with you, dog. If you can't trust me for who I am, this is just not fair. I'm not playing this game. You do what you're going to do. Or saying, which is I'm more prone to do, is challenge accepted. I'll meet you where you're at, as you are, and be consistent and persistent and not intrusive, but inviting, because that requires freedom, and allow her to come on her own terms. And you can say, well, she may never come. Yeah, there is that chance. There's always that chance. Which ironically is the choice that God made too in His relationship with us. He invites us, but that gives us the opportunity then to say no. And He's like, okay, I'm willing to take those odds because of my persistence and consistency and my love for you and the grace that I offer you to live life truly freely. And then also to see that you can have that same thing in the relationships you live day in and day out, in which I inhabit in some way as well. Even the relationship with your animals. Because why is it that animals affect us so when they die? Because they offer us something that I think is an echo of the universe that God created. It's the kind of unconditional love and presence and literally undying loyalty to us, to you and me, to love me as I am. They don't really care what I look like on social media. They don't care at all. They just care about the relationship we have with one another, and that's going to take some time. It is. I'm not counting down the days until she jumps into my arms or meets me at the front door with her tail wagging. No, I'm not. Because I know that I've just been invited into a redemption project, if you will, that is representative even of the redemption project that I look like. And that's not demeaning. It's just, wow, that I'm loved that much to give me that kind of freedom and a willingness to meet me where I am, not demand that I get to a certain point and then I'm going to take some time to develop you. No, it's, as the phrase often goes, you don't have to believe to belong. You belong right out of the gate. we'll figure out the belief stuff as we move along. So, just some food for thought. It's a strange kind of pulling back of things, but I think we have lessons waiting for us if we can open our eyes to see what's going on and see that the world is not random. Actually, the world around us is inhabited not only by three-dimensional human flesh and blood humans, but also with a God that loves us so much that he's willing to meet us in a language that maybe we understand that no one else does. And that's truly remarkable. It's truly, dare I say it, divine. And that's the backdrop even to some of what we're talking about. And the vision that I slowly had developed around Stained Glass International is being able to see and be seen without something to protect me, which is what the stained glass represents. So with that, there's my segue. Let me kind of land us here and draw us to a close. But I had mentioned last week and the week before that we have become official as an organization, and we are now Stained Glass International, or SGI, or another outgrowth of the ministry of Stained Glass International is SG Media. And this podcast will become part of that, as well as our blog. And so as Stained Glass International, its prime motivation is a devotion to developing and providing resources and retreats and training even for the next generation of Christians coming up. And some of what I've talked about even tonight is that backdrop. It's the depth. I think the next generation of Christians have been hurt. They're like Cherry. They've been hurt. And they walk very tentatively into the church waiting to be condemned because they're already well on their way to condemning themselves. And it's even worse when you hear condemnation that matches what we've got going on in our own heads. And the next generation of Christians is no different than us. We've just found different strategies for handling it. We also need to find a way to develop counselors who are sensitive to this kind of thing in how they approach the people, not the clients that they talk to. It's not just a client, but it's a person who is doing something very rare, and that is opening their lives to somebody that they don't even know in the hopes of becoming something they're not even sure what that is. They just want something better. That's all. So that's the overall mission of SGI. And that's what this whole undertaking is really about. And so in that effort, we have a website. The website right now is drmitsch.com. We'll be migrating to a new website that will reflect some of these changes. So if you've got questions, you can DM me your questions on Instagram. That's probably the quickest way to do it. You can also find it on the website. And when you hit the website now, this is different than it's been in the past. What you'll find is there will be a pop-up that asks you to join our mailing list. And I would encourage you just to do that. Encourage other people to do that as well. Because any new content that hits the website, you'll be notified of that. And then you can come back and take a look at what new content comes up. That would include a podcast entry. That will include a blog post, which hopefully we're going to get that ramped up and more content being presented there. And so you can subscribe on the website to the website and all the changes, or you can follow us on any of the social media platforms that you might use. On Instagram, we can be found at the Psych Monologues. And at Facebook, Ray.Mitch, and LinkedIn, Dr. Mitch. And I am reasonably sure we will be separating me out from the organization so that we will have different addresses in those other social platforms for you to find us. Now, as far as the podcast is concerned, if you just want to follow us, you can follow us on any of the platforms out there that are aggregating and distributing podcasts, and that could be Spotify or Stitcher or iTunes or whatever it is that you use. You can find us there as well. Please subscribe. And if some of what I'm talking about and the way that I talk about it, and there's some really pretty fun, exciting changes coming that will probably show up consistently in the new year, but we're going to try some things out here toward the end of the year just to see how they fit and whether it works. But you can subscribe, and if you do, like I said, one way to get other people exposed and interested in some of the things that we're talking about here is to write a review, and hopefully it would be a positive one. But encouraging people to come and check us out and hear about, a strange podcast episode like you heard tonight. And that's me reflecting on the training I'm getting from my dog. That's kind of strange. So you can do all that. The second big item is developing a scholarship fund, a fund that would help students and other people be a part of our silent retreats. And right now our silent retreat is fairly narrow because it's that's who knows about it is CCU and the students that go there as well as the alums. But I would really love to see us develop a big enough scholarship fund that would allow us to make it more accessible to people that can't afford to come. And they want to be a part of it. They want to learn something about the silent retreat. And again, this is an introduction of something new but ancient. And that would include the introduction to silence and solitude. So if you'd be interested and willing to partner with us to continue to grow the scholarship fund, you can do that at the podcast or at the website at drmitch.com. There's a donation button at the very bottom of the page that allows you to donate. All of your gifts and donations are tax deductible now because we've been established that by the IRS. And you can do it that way. If you would prefer to write us a physical check, you can do that. And I think I mentioned this last week. I've got a place for you to send it to. So make your check out to Stained Glass International. And the address is SGI or Stained Glass International, P.O. Box 160, East Lake, Colorado 80614. So if you want to send us a physical check, you're more than welcome to do so. Just make it out to Stained Glass International, P.O. Box, and the address, P.O. Box 160, East Lake, Colorado 80614. So that's it for tonight. This has been a little different, I think. I think there's some things here that we and I need to pay attention to, and even in my own spiritual journey, I hope it's been interesting and challenging to you. So thanks so much for joining me. I am very honored and privileged that you would take time out of your busy schedule to listen to us this hour or so. It went a little longer than I expected, but hey, that's okay. So, as I always say, thanks so much for coming and love ya. Later.